All right, good afternoon. So we're just going to kind of review a little bit about our crayfish. So what are the structures of a crayfish? Okay, so crayfish structures, you guys saw this Google form yesterday. It is what are crayfish structures? It is the parts of a crayfish. Let me see. Is there... Okay, the parts you observed are structures. Structures are the parts of the crayfish. You can use this crayfish structure sheet to organize your observation about the structures. Okay, so again, the structures are the parts of the crayfish. So let's review this Google form that you guys did yesterday, or I know there were some problems with the Google form, so no worries if you weren't able to do it. But what's important is that right now you're paying close attention. Do the crayfish have eyes? How many? Yes, they have 2 eyes. Do they have ears? How many? They have no ears. I thought that was kind of funny. Do crayfish have walking legs? How many? 4. Do they have antennae? They have 6 to smell food. That's how they smell their food. Do crayfish have tail flaps? They have 5. And I know you probably weren't able to see that. I will try to figure out a way to pick them up so you can see their tail flaps. So they have pincers. I know we see the 2 large ones, but they actually have 6. They have 2 large, and they're the ones you can see. And I know it's harder to see the crayfish on the computer, so I understand. That's why we're going to go over this. There's 2 large ones, and there's 4 small ones on the tips of their walking legs. So altogether, there's 6. Okay. Do crayfish have joints? They actually do. I know that's something we didn't talk about, but they have 10 different joints. Do the crayfish have mouth parts? Just their 1. Do they have tail joints? 1. Do crayfish have bristles? Thousands, all over the body to help touch, smell, and feel. Does the crayfish have bumps and points? Okay, and they do on the tail and swimmeret, and on tail and swimmerets, so it's under the tail. So I didn't have a chance to flip over the crayfish to show you the bumps and points. What other crayfish structures did you observe? Okay, and that's just something to think about. Each of the structures you observed is useful. So remember the structures that I'm talking about, what we just talked about, the walking legs, the eyes, the antennae, the pincers. Okay, all of those structures you observed is useful to the crayfish in some way. Each structure has a function in the crayfish's life. A function is the action or purpose of a structure. For example, crayfish have structures called pincers. The pincers have several functions. They capture food, hold things, tear food, and defend the crayfish from predators. Okay, so there's a purpose for those pincers, and a function is the action or purpose. So what is the reason? Purpose means the reason. What is the reason? Why do they have pincers? Okay, they use it to capture food, hold things, tear food, and defend themselves. Crayfish have 2 sets of antennae on their head to help them sense their environment. They have appendages, legs, and mouth parts to help them move and eat. Some structures have functions that help the crayfish survive. Others have functions that help it reproduce. Okay, so think about yourself and ourselves. We all have structures. We all have body parts. And there's a function. Each of them have a function. So think about your hands. Okay, that's a body part or a structure if we're talking about animals. And the function of your hands is to write, is to grab things. Your hands can be used as well, like crayfish, to defend yourself if you need to. But That's what we're talking about here. These are just big fancy words for the parts of the crayfish and their function. So each part of your body has a function. Okay, your mouth has a function, right? The function you have to eat, you need to chew your food. Your teeth have a function. They chew your food. There's a purpose for all of your body parts. There's a purpose. Just like crayfish, all of their body parts, there's a reason that they have them and a reason that they need them to survive. Okay, so let's look at the structure. The structure, their eyes. What are their eyes used for? That's the function. They're used for vision, sensing light. Ears, well, there's no ears. Walking legs, what is their function? What do they use walking legs for? Mobility, grooming, feeding, and holding. The antennae, what do they use that for? Smelling and feeling. Tail flaps, what's their function? So let's see. Moving backward, protecting the undertail. Pincers, what's their function? Catching and tearing food, holding and defending. Leg joints, what are their function? Walking, feeding, reaching in all directions, and bending. Okay, just like we have joints in our bodies, they help us to move. Mouth parts, what is their function? The function of the mouth parts: biting, chewing, cutting, and feeding. Tail joints, the function: bending, thrusting, protecting undertail. And bristles, I'm going to try to see if I can show you guys the bristles. Remember, there's thousands of them all over their body. They're real tiny. They're for sensing things and protection. So if they sense a predator, those bristles help with that. Bumps, they're for protection and defense. And then you have the hard shell for protection. Okay, so you may have noticed differences among the crayfish. Did you observe any differences? Again, I know that it's challenging on the computer. But some differences may be due to age. Younger crayfish tend to be smaller. So you did notice that we do have some small crayfish and we do have some larger ones. Okay, so younger crayfish tend to be smaller. Or to life events, crayfish may be missing antennae, walking legs, or pincers. No, I didn't see that on our crayfish, that they were missing anything. But we do have some young crayfish. We have about 2 small ones and I feel like 2 larger ones. Differences may also be due to the gender of the crayfish. Males and females have different structures as shown on the crayfish diagram sheet. Okay, so let's look at the differences. The first 2 pairs of swimmerets are modified on males. Males have bigger pincers and narrower tails. Okay, look over here at the male. They have bigger pincers and a narrow tail than females. Females have an egg pore and longer swimmerets. So right here are these swimmerets. Okay, you can see they're a little bit longer than the males. So those are the differences between a male and a female. Okay, and you can look at all the labels on this diagram. Okay, and then we have this slide. Okay, you can read that one. Okay, so now you know that the crayfish are here in our classroom community. How should they be cared for ensure their well-being? Okay, what do we need to know about crayfish in order to keep them here? Feeding, what, how much, how often? Water, how deep, what temperature, and how often to change. Air, space. Okay, crayfish need all of these things. They need food, they need water, they need air, and they need space, and they need hiding places, as you already know. Okay, the place where an animal lives is its habitat. Okay, and we have 2 crayfish in each tray, and you can see, you guys saw, this is kind of what our environment or the crayfish habitat looks like. In their natural habitat, that means when they're not in a classroom and they're, out in the ponds and the rivers and the streams. In their natural habitat, crayfish find their own food and shelter. In the classroom, they must be fed and provided with a suitable environment. So you saw that we fed them yesterday or the other day. So here's what we have to do. We have to keep the water cool, no direct sunlight. So I kind of have them in an area where it gets no sun. I have to keep the water clean. So today I cleaned their water. Provide plants as a food source. So I did, remember I showed you guys at the end of class today, the lettuce. Okay, and then use additional basins for feeding protein-based food. Okay, so the flower pots, the green plastic flower pots have been cut in half. These provide additional shelter for the crayfish. They're like crayfish houses. Crayfish are agile climbers. We do not place rocks or any objects near the sides of the trays. The crayfish will use them as stepping stones to explore the outside world. The crayfish get moved to the smaller basins to eat their fish food. So you saw that I had to move them to like those pink little bins. Okay, the food should not be placed in their habitat container. Molts, okay, you guys may have read about this. If a crayfish molts, it will be very soft. It will have to be isolated in a basin. So if we see the crayfish molting, that means he came out of his shell because he needs a new shell. I have to put the crayfish in by itself. Okay, they have to be isolated. That means by themselves. When the shell is hard, it can return. A freshly molted crayfish will feel rubbery and its pincers are harmless. We cannot squeeze its carapace to pick it up. Okay, now you guys already did our reading. All right. You guys don't have this packet yet, but I may be getting you, the crayfish packet. But hopefully you guys have learned a little bit more about crayfish. I know we've talked about it in class, and we talked about some of the structures, some of the functions, some why we have flower pots. So hopefully now you understand a little bit more about our crayfish. And there is actually nothing to do after this. I may post a Jamboard. I'm not sure, but check the to-do list. There may be a Jamboard. There will be a Jamboard for you to complete. So make sure you put your name at the bottom of the sticky note. So I'm going to ask a question on the Jamboard, and you guys will put Post-it notes with your name at the bottom, okay? All right. I hope you enjoy learning a little bit more about crayfish.